people need to have the benefit, as most people in Europe have had, because the trend toward higher alcohol in Europe is much more recent. They need to have had the benefit of tasting lower alcohol wines and being able to compare. In California, where I'm based, a lot of people who are just getting into wine only have the high alcohol wines for reference points. So they need to be educated that there are other options out there. German Riesling is pretty much my favorite go-to wine because it's so good with a lot of food. And you can still get great German Rieslings for good prices at 8% alcohol. You can drink a whole bottle of that and feel very unaffected.
But the fact that wines are still being made at high alcohol levels is because there is a market for that.
Of course,
and I don't think
absolutely.
that market will go away, and I don't think it should go away. I think that people should produce wines for the drinkers who want that style, and there's nothing wrong with that style. However, the wine makers have been in denial a lot, and basically they are only just getting it. And there are some winemakers who've actually admitted that they don't even like their wine.
Absolutely, yeah, I talked to them, the same ones, yeah. But yet there still is a broad push to keep making wine. You get a Chardonnay that's 16.2 and you're thinking, now granted, as a wine writer and as a consistent wine drinker, I do look for things that are lower alcohol, not so much for the health benefits, but because I'm looking for wines that pair well with the food, something that doesn't blow out my palate. But a lot of people, as you were saying, are getting new into wine. They only have that as a vantage point to start with a 15.5 Chard. And I find that frustrating because where do they go from there? And I don't think that in 5 to 7 years that overall alcohol level is going to be pulled back. I don't see that happening.
Now, are there some varietals of wines that are more appropriately made with higher alcohol levels than others?
There's some, like in the Douro and Zinfandel here, that they don't get fully ripe until they've got all that high sugar level.
But back in, say, 1985, 86, something like Sorsal Zinfandel, one of my favorite Zins from America, was not 15. It was considered very high in alcohol then, but it was maybe 14% alcohol, and it wasn't underripe. And I don't buy it. Really.
So some of the Zins, like the Turley Zins, which were getting up to 17% or so, and taking advantage of the clones and the yeast that can do that, did start getting 98 points, 100 points from the influential critics, and that I think did convince other Zinfandel growers and makers that they needed to get up to that level too. But I definitely think there's a backlash. People are starting to wake up and see we got.
And also the influence of certain powerful critics is not as powerful as it was, and also during the dot-com era and the financial growth area in the bankers' growth. Basically, there were a lot of new people with a lot of money who are getting into wine and being taught by certain wine writers that this is what is good. And a lot of these people have been brought up on hamburgers and ketchup. And so the finer nuances of cuisine might have been lacking, and certainly if they weren't growing up with wine.
So perhaps we should be serving our kids wine at earlier ages
Well,
and
absolutely.
getting them to have more refined palates.
Well, this is a whole other topic.
And I do think there is a learning curve. I think when you start off drinking wine, you do go to what is in the market. Right now, there are high alcohol wines. But as that trend continues as a wine drinker, I think, hopefully, certainly what I write about is that their palates will evolve and change, and they will begin to demand or ask for or seek out lower alcohol wines. I still see the trend as being very strong, and I don't think it's going to. I have winemakers say, I don't want to do this, but yet they keep doing it.
Yeah. Well, we had Broadbent Sections, my company. We had the VCU, Virginia Commonwealth University. They have a brand center, which is one of the most important brand building university colleges, and we had them do a survey on building the Broadbent brand of wines. But in it, they covered the global wine picture. And what was really most interesting to me was the attitudes of Gen Y and what's after Gen Y? It's Gen X, Gen Y. X. No, Gen X was first,
Gen X,
then
Gen Z,
Y.
they're calling it.
No, Gen Y and then the
Millennials.
This brand study did a study of what influences the Gen Y groups and the Gen X and the Millennials. But particularly in Gen Y, they are influenced by word of mouth, not social media, but social networking. If you say on your Facebook, I found this fantastic wine, bodegas Weinert from Argentina and Malbec, and 300 friends of theirs sees that, they're going to take peer recommendations, and they just don't want some older.
Yeah, but they're not talking about alcohol levels.
Right,
no one's posting on their Facebook page,
So what
great
I'm
wine, but
hearing
it's
you say is
15.5.
that, right, if you want people to start getting more excited about lower alcohol levels and asking for that, you need to get people talking, spreading it out in their networks.
Yeah, but the way that it relates to the low alcohol is that they're into discovering wines from obscure places, which are not producing the sort of big alcohol cabs, big alcohol Merlots, big alcohol Chardonnays. Those are not being what they're being exposed to. They're being exposed to
More niche wines.
Chateau Musar, or Lebanese wines, or Bulgarian wines, or wines from more obscure countries, and which are just haven't been reviewed, haven't sort of followed that.
Well, and what would be interesting to see is what happens in 5 to 10 years if those alcohol levels from, say, something like Lebanon, if those Lebanese wine levels begin to rise up as well as a result of people demanding that kind of thing. I still think that, I know when I buy wine, I look at the alcohol level of what I'm buying, because it is a conscious choice to say, I don't want something that's this hot. I just don't.
I think the wine bars are influential with the millennials and that generation as well, and a lot of wine bars are starting to focus more on natural wines.
Millennials aren't drinking it; they're under 21.
Oh, sorry, I thought that's who you were referring to.
No, Gen
yeah.
Y and Gen X.
I'm sure they're drinking, but
But Gen
wasn't
Y,
that age,
Gen
but,
Y and Gen X. So I
right.
agree with you. The wine bars and the sommeliers are influencing them, absolutely.
yes.
And do the wine bars tend to serve higher alcohol
No,
wines?
I think not. The newer ones, the ones that are popular these days, that are focusing on natural wines and wines from more obscure areas, they're exposing that generation, whatever you want to call it, to lower alcohol.
But the great thing about that, and I agree with you, is also the fact that they're talking about these wines with food. And I think that's where change, as I see it, really begins to happen, is when people have wine with food and they have something that's too hot for their food and they don't want that wine anymore. They want something that's going to work with the wine, and the meal is a complete experience, as opposed to, man, this thing just blew out my palate. I couldn't taste the, fill in the blank. So I think that's part of the education is people get, their palates become more educated, not only in terms of wine, but food. It's easy to balance those two.
Well, overall, it seems like the lower alcohol content is much preferred.
It is to me personally, but
To at least
I think
our
all
group.
three of us certainly agree with
Yeah,
that.
And
and
there
there's a
seems to be
growing
trend moving
trend
in
towards
that
that, yeah.
direction. But you'll have to decide for yourself. And we hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll read up more about this on our website, IntoWine.com, where you'll find some fabulous articles about this issue. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.